The summer sun rose slowly over the plains of northeastern Europe in the year 1410, casting its light on a continent torn by ambition, faith, and shifting alliances. To understand the immensity of what was about to unfold at Grunwald, one must first trace the roots of the powers that collided there. For centuries, the lands along the Baltic Sea had been home to proud tribes and emergent kingdoms, each struggling for survival amid the wider currents of medieval Christendom. But looming over these lands was a formidable order of warrior monks, the Teutonic Knights, who had carved out a state from conquest and conversion, building castles of stone and iron discipline. Cloaked in white surcoats marked with black crosses, they carried the banner of crusade against those they deemed heathen, yet their ambitions reached beyond religion into dominion and wealth. The Teutonic Order had begun centuries earlier in the Holy Land, caring for pilgrims before transforming into a military brotherhood. When the tides of the Crusades turned against Christian armies in the Levant, the knights sought new battlefields, and the Baltic frontier became their new Holy Land. They declared wars of conversion against pagan Prussians, Lithuanians, and others, forcing the cross at the point of the sword. Yet their zeal for conquest brought them into uneasy contact with kingdoms that were Christian already, kingdoms like Poland, who bristled at the Order's expansion. Over time, what began as holy mission hardened into territorial rivalry. By the dawn of the 15th century, the Order stood at the height of its power. Their castles dotted the landscape from Königsberg to Marienburg, each a symbol of stone dominance. Merchants brought wealth through their ports, and their knights, trained from youth in war, formed one of the most disciplined forces in Europe. Yet across their borders, forces were gathering that would test their might like never before. In Poland, King Władysław II Jagiełło, himself once the pagan Grand Duke of Lithuania, now ruled a Christian kingdom forged in union with his homeland. By marrying Queen Jadwiga of Poland, Jagiełło bound Lithuania and Poland together, creating a vast realm that stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea. It was a realm that the Teutonic Knights eyed with suspicion, for the Order's very purpose was undermined when Lithuania converted to Christianity under Jagiełło. Their justification for crusade began to crumble, leaving only ambition to guide their swords. The stage was set for confrontation, for both sides sought to secure their borders and expand their influence. Skirmishes and disputes over disputed territories flared in the years before 1410, but it was the Order's aggression into lands of Lithuania that lit the fire. When towns burned and treaties frayed, Poland and Lithuania found common cause in war. This was not to be a mere raid or punitive strike, but a full campaign to bring the Order to heel. As word spread of the looming conflict, banners were summoned across the lands. Polish knights resplendent in their crested helms and colourful surcoats gathered under their lords. From Lithuania came warriors of many traditions, armoured boyars, fierce horse archers, and men hardened by years of frontier fighting. Allies joined as well, Ruthenians, Tatars, and contingents from distant lands who saw in the struggle a chance for glory or vengeance. It was a coalition of immense size, perhaps the greatest assembly of medieval arms in Europe until that time. The Teutonic Order, for its part, responded with equal determination. Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen, a stern and uncompromising leader, called upon his knights, vassals, and mercenaries from across Germany and beyond. Their banners fluttered with the Black Cross, their ranks swollen with men who believed in the righteousness of their cause, or at least the wealth promised in conquest. From castles and towns, they marched with precision, confident that their discipline and armor would outweigh the mixed host that opposed them. As the summer of 1410 unfolded, two mighty hosts began their march. The Polish-Lithuanian army moved northward, crossing rivers and forests with determination, while the Teutonic Order advanced to meet them, their supply wagons creaking with provisions for a protracted campaign. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, for seldom had Europe seen such a concentration of armed men moving toward a single destiny. Between them lay the fields near the villages of Tannenberg and Grunwald, where the fate of nations would be decided. The morning of July 15th dawned hot and clear, the sun beating down on the plains of Grunwald. To the east, the banners of Poland and Lithuania rose in a forest of color and movement, knights polishing armor that reflected the rising light. Across the field, The white cloaks of the Teutonic knights stood in ordered ranks, their war horses stamping the ground impatiently. It was a spectacle unlike any Europe had yet witnessed, for by some accounts nearly 60,000 men faced one another across that field, a host larger than many towns or regions could ever muster. The Polish-Lithuanian host was a tapestry of cultures and tactics. At its heart stood the heavy cavalry of Poland, armored knights and men-at-arms whose lineage traced centuries of European chivalry. Alongside them were Lithuanian troops, lighter in armor but swift and cunning, accustomed to fighting on the wide steppes and forests. Among their allies rode Ruthenian nobles from the east, their banners adorned with icons of saints. Tatar horsemen, mercenaries from the steppe, lent their skills in swift raids and arrow storms. Even Bohemian and Moravian contingents joined, bringing with them soldiers versed in the latest tactics. Facing them, the Teutonic knights marshaled perhaps the most disciplined army of their age. Their core was the knight brothers themselves, men bound by vows of poverty and obedience, yet armed with the finest weapons and armor of Christendom. Alongside them fought German mercenaries, burghers from the towns, and vassal knights from across the Holy Roman Empire. Their order was famed for its military precision, drilling in formation, and executing maneuvers with iron discipline. Their infantry wielded long spears, crossbows, and early firearms, while their cavalry formed a wall of steel-clad riders prepared to crash through any foe. At their head, Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen commanded with stern resolve, flanked by his officers and standard-bearers carrying the great banner of the Black Cross. As the sun climbed higher, the armies drew into lines of battle. The Poles held the left wing, their knights gleaming in heraldic colors, while the Lithuanians took the right, their light cavalry poised for swift maneuvers. In the center stood contingents from across the realm, forming a solid core. Across the field, the Teutonic knights arrayed themselves with calculated precision, their banners forming a wall of crosses and eagles. Between the armies stretched a wide plain of grass and earth, destined soon to be churned into mud and blood. Chroniclers tell us that both sides waited in tense silence, the heat of the day growing oppressive. The Poles and Lithuanians, it is said, lingered in prayer, their banners fluttering weakly in the still air. Some accounts claim that the Grand Master, impatient with the delay, sent messengers bearing swords to Jagiełło and his cousin Vytautas of Lithuania, challenging them to come forth and fight. If true, it was a gesture both arrogant and symbolic, for the Teutonic Order had never doubted its own superiority in battle. At last, the stillness broke. The Lithuanian cavalry surged forward, loosing arrows and charging into the Order's flank. A great roar echoed across the field as the armies collided, steel on steel, horse against horse. The Battle of Grunwald had begun. The field erupted in chaos as the first charges struck home. Lithuanian horsemen wheeled and darted, loosing arrows into the ranks of the Teutonic infantry, while their heavy cavalry clashed with German knights in brutal combat. The sun climbed higher, beating mercilessly upon armor and flesh, as men screamed and banners fell. To the left, the Polish knights engaged in their own ferocious struggle, their lances shattering on impact, swords flashing in the sun. The earth shook beneath the weight of thousands of horses, their hooves pounding like thunder. For a moment it seemed the Lithuanians were faltering. Chronicles speak of their cavalry breaking and retreating, pursued by the Teutonic knights who believed victory was within their grasp. Dust and shouts filled the air as the Order pressed forward, their disciplined formations driving the lighter troops before them. Yet the retreat was not total, and whether by design or fortune, the Lithuanians drew their pursuers away from the main field, thinning the Teutonic line. The Poles seized the moment, pressing their advantage on the left, while Jagiełło himself, seated beneath a tree, watched with calm resolve, sending orders through his messengers to adjust the flow of battle. At the heart of the conflict, the struggle grew desperate. Men fought hand to hand, grappling with axes, swords, and maces, their armor dented and bloodied. The clash of steel rang out across the plain, punctuated by the cries of the wounded and the thunder of banners falling. Dust choked the air, mingling with the heat to create a haze in which friend and foe alike could barely see. Yet the fight raged on, for neither side would yield. Grandmaster Ulrich von Jungingen, realizing the peril of his forces, led a charge himself, seeking to break the Polish lines with sheer force. His knights crashed into the melee, their banners flying high, striking terror into their foes. For a time, the Polish ranks wavered, driven back by the relentless assault. But Jagiło and Vytautas rallied their men, calling forth reserves and urging them to stand. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The Lithuanian horsemen, having regrouped after their apparent retreat, now swept back upon the field, striking the Teutonic flanks with renewed vigor. What the order had believed to be victory became a trap. Their knights encircled and pressed on all sides. The battlefield grew ever more chaotic, with men fighting in desperate knots, the ground slick with blood and littered with broken weapons. The struggle reached its climax in the center, where the great banners of both sides clashed in a storm of steel. Chroniclers tell of the Grand Master himself, fighting valiantly, striking down foes until he was overwhelmed and slain. His death sent a shock through the ranks of the order, their cohesion faltering as their leader fell. Slowly, inexorably, the Polish-Lithuanian host pressed forward, crushing resistance beneath their weight. By late afternoon, the field was a scene of carnage. Survivors sought to rally around their commanders, but the coalition army pressed them relentlessly. What had begun as a confident advance ended in disaster, their discipline broken, their pride shattered. As night fell over the field of Grunwald, the scale of the slaughter became clear. Thousands lay dead or dying, their armor twisted, their bodies strewn across the plain. The Teutonic Order, once the terror of the Baltic, had suffered its most crushing defeat. Grandmaster Ulrich von Jungingen lay among the fallen, along with much of the Order's leadership. For Poland and Lithuania, it was a triumph of staggering proportions, a vindication of their alliance and their resolve. Yet even in victory, the path ahead was complex. The coalition army marched upon Marienburg, the great fortress of the Teutonic Order, hoping to end their power in a single stroke. But the castle's defenses were formidable, and the besiegers, weary and strained by supply difficulties, could not take it. The Order, though broken in the field, survived behind its walls, and in time recovered some of its strength. Still, the aura of invincibility that had surrounded the Black Cross was gone forever. For the kingdoms of Poland and Lithuania, Grunwald became a symbol of unity and resilience. It confirmed the strength of their union, binding together two peoples with different traditions into a single force capable of challenging one of Europe's greatest powers. Over the following decades, the Teutonic Order's decline continued, culminating in the eventual absorption of its lands into the Polish crown. The battle marked the beginning of a shift in the balance of power in Eastern Europe, paving the way for the rise of Poland-Lithuania as a great power of the late Middle Ages. The memory of Grunwald endured far beyond the 15th century. Chroniclers recorded its details, poets sang of its heroes, and later generations looked to it as a moment of triumph over oppression. In Polish and Lithuanian memory, it became a symbol of resistance and victory, while in German lands, it was remembered as a tragic but noble defeat. The clash of July 15th was not merely a military encounter, but a turning point in the story of medieval Europe, where crusading zeal met the realities of shifting politics and national ambition. The field itself bore witness to the scale of the encounter. Mass graves held the fallen, while villagers recounted tales of banners and weapons left scattered for years after. The names of Grunwald, Tannenberg, and Jalgiris became forever entwined, each language giving voice to the memory of the clash. Across centuries, the echoes of that day would resound in wars, literature, and national identity, shaping how peoples understood their past. In the broader context of Europe, the battle marked a transition. It showed that the age of the crusading orders was waning, their authority and justification eroded by the rise of centralized kingdoms and changing politics. The great clash at Grunwald revealed that unity, strategy, and determination could overcome even the most disciplined of foes. It was a lesson not lost on contemporaries, and one that historians would reflect upon for centuries to come. Thus, the Battle of Grunwald stands as one of medieval Europe's greatest clashes, not only for the numbers who fought, nor for the drama of the combat, but for its enduring consequences. It was the day when the might of the Teutonic Order was broken, when the crowns of Poland and Lithuania rose in triumph, and when the course of Eastern Europe was forever changed. On that field, amid the dust and blood, the medieval world shifted, and history took a new path.